Don't you dare for a second put playoff expectations on Tennessee.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in this, the greatest sport on planet Earth. I had a big letdown last year, and I'm kind of optimistic it won't happen again with Virginia Tech. And what about Iowa? There's something you need to know about Iowa. That's all on today's show, which is brought to you by our friends over at Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. So, Tennessee had a noisy offseason, and on the one hand, it was in a bad way. On the other hand, it was in a really, really good way, because the whole Nico drama sets the stage to make Tennessee, at the very least, interesting. Colin Cowherd has a, shall we say, loose appreciation, in my view, for college football as a whole. He likes interesting. Well, Tennessee and UCLA are interesting. How do they play out with a quarterback swap? I think there should have been some draft picks exchanged. I'm sure Cowherd thinks that that's possible in college sports. But I think that for Tennessee coming into this year, it is perfectly fine. Vols fans, I'm not telling you you're going back to the days of Jeremy Pruitt and the like, and they're not even close to being an SEC contender. I'm not putting you in that category of saying you shouldn't have hopes. But there's a difference between hope and expectation. Alabama should expect to make the playoff this year. Tennessee hopes to make it. They shouldn't have the expectation that they are going to do it. That doesn't mean that telling Nico and his camp, no, we don't want to go forward with this anymore, we're going in a different direction, wasn't the right move. Because what I now see this season as is, for Tennessee, is a season kind of like what I talked about with Oregon State last week on the show, kind of like what Clemson had last year. I know Clemson had an ACC championship, but it's what I look at and call a foundational year. You are looking for positive things to carry over into the next season. You're looking to have the sort of year that oftentimes precedes a season in which you go out and pop. Tennessee is its own best example of this, by the way, because the year before 2024, when they make the playoff for the first time, they, of course, benefit from the expanded playoff, and the upset loss to Arkansas doesn't mean as much as I would like it to, but their win over Alabama was, of course, huge. Doing that for the second time in 3 years, that's a big deal. I'm very well aware of how great of a job Josh Heupel has done there. But in 2023, they were fine. I think that's what Tennessee is going to be again this year. Nothing wrong with that. Most programs, save for a select few like Georgia and Ohio State, because even Michigan can have this sort of season, and I think Michigan is going to have that same sort of season this year. It's a foundational year. It's a building year. It's not a go out and expect to make the playoff. Joey Aguilar doesn't have to light the world on fire to win games. However, with Tennessee's schedule, I do think he would have to outperform what is reasonable to expect from him if the Vols are going to get back to the playoff. Because the biggest difference on paper, and partially on the field as well, though we haven't seen it in their new uniforms, of course, because they're playing with different teams. That wasn't just like a general uniform note. Anyway, Joey Aguilar at Appalachian State turned the ball over a lot. He had 14 interceptions in 11 games last year. He's now going to the SEC. Is it reasonable to expect him to even have a Nico type season? Nico last year certainly had his ups and downs. His stats in big games were not very good. He was frequently under 200 yards and under 50% completion. Now, I was still going to be high on Tennessee with Nico there because I think another year in the Josh Heupel system, Nico could have gotten closer to maximizing his talent. Now, of course, he goes to UCLA. But last year, he threw for just over 2,600 yards, 19 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. He took care of the football. He let the defense and run game, which became the foundation of Tennessee's team last year in their run to the playoff, he allowed that to be the case by taking care of the ball. Is Joey Aguilar going to step in and have that same sort of success? I do like Josh Heupel a lot. I don't have concerns. Hear me out. I don't have concerns about Tennessee's running game. I know Dylan Sampson isn't there. I still think they're going to be able to run the football. The defense, a couple more questions, should still be good. They have recruited well. They have got some good talent. My guy Eric Kane over at Locked On Vols says, yeah, feel good about the defense. He feels great about the running game because of what Josh Heupel's done and the talent they have there. So that brings us to Tennessee's schedule. I do like them under 8.5 wins, which was 9.5 coming into the year. Even with Nico, I was maybe taking them under. Maybe, but we'll never know because that's not a world we live in anymore. I land on 8-4 for Tennessee here in the 2025 season. I could very easily see 7-5. 9-3 to me feels like everything is going really, really right because you got to remember, this was 10-2 last year, and that Alabama game was a go either way. They were able to get it done at home, but this year you have Alabama on the road, and this time you have Georgia coming to Neyland Stadium. Going to be an awesome game. Think they're going to be outmatched in that spot. So the schedule for Tennessee, it's not as hard necessarily as what Iowa's got to deal with later. I'll talk about that to wrap today's show. But they open with a neutral site at Syracuse because why play games on campus when you could play it elsewhere, right? Just such utter lunacy. Defense and run game can win you that one. No Kyle McCord there for the Orange. Yeah, I'll take Tennessee to win that game. ETSU, you don't need to know what ETSU stands for to know that Tennessee's going to win. Georgia's a loss. Look, hear me out. Hear me out with this next one. I think Tennessee's going to lose at Mississippi State. I have been beating this drum all season long. Mississippi State is going to beat somebody this year that you don't think they can or that you don't think they should. It's going to happen. Jeff Lebby, I think, has his head screwed on straight as a head coach. He's a darn good offensive play caller. You don't think Blake Shapen's that good. I don't think he's a world beater. I do know that when he played last year in the Bulldogs offense, he was darn good. Protected the ball, put up good numbers, and then he got hurt, and Mississippi State was a patchwork at quarterback. I think that's going to be the first kind of turn the corner as a program win for Mississippi State. Tennessee, first half of the season, still kind of figuring some things out. But last year, if I'd picked them before the year to lose at Arkansas, what would you have called me? Before you hop in the comment section, what would you have said? How uninformed would I have been? How much of a non-knower of ball would I have been declared had I picked Tennessee to lose at Arkansas? I thought that game would be closer than the spread. I didn't think Arkansas would win. Imagine if I had. So before you just jump on me, just consider those things. Speaking of Arkansas, Tennessee will get the bounce back win this year at home. They will lose at Alabama, beat Kentucky. I do have them beating Oklahoma because they're at home. If it were on the road, I'd probably take the Sooners. That's the game that could easily push Tennessee to 7-5 in my view because I like John Mateer coming over from Washington State more than I like Joey Aguilar coming over from Appalachian State. But Tennessee's at home. It's not exactly a cakewalk to go into Old Rocky Top and win. New Mexico State, that's of course a win. At Florida, I think that's a loss. I'm not that bullish on Florida like a lot of people are, but that game gets weird for Tennessee. I think Florida's good, not great. I think Tennessee's kind of good, not great. And they close with a win against Vanderbilt at home in an in-state matchup. So I have 8-4. I'd pick 7-5 because of that Oklahoma game before. I would pick 9-3, but there's nothing wrong with any of that. It doesn't mean that the program's just going to go off. Josh Heupel made the right decision. He knows what he's doing. He made the right cultural move. They should have playoff hopes. They should always have playoff hopes in the modern era in the 12-team college football playoff format. Playoff expectations are a different thing. I'm not putting those on Tennessee this year whatsoever. It's not a fair thing to do in my view. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hit me up on Twitter, all of that good stuff. How about Virginia Tech? Yeah, I need to have a word with Virginia Tech. First, this episode brought to you by Monarch Money. Do you ever wish managing your money felt easier? Well, with Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money, way more than just a budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Do you have that one financial goal you want to finally get serious about? Maybe you wanted to hit a certain threshold in your savings. Well, with Monarch Money, you can get there. They are here to help you out. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Check them out at monarchmoney.com. The Hokies and I need to have a talk. So let's talk, Virginia Tech. You have, for quite a while, been described by some in the college football space as a sleeping giant. Because there are some of us who don't even have to be that old, such as myself, that remember a time when Virginia Tech was a perennial preseason top 15 to 20 team that would play some high caliber non-conference games that were must-see TV, where Blacksburg would be on fire. Where has that program gone? Hasn't been around in a while. Last year was supposed to be the season. I bought into Virginia Tech last year. They were bringing back a lot of their roster from an improved and trending up 7-6 team. Brent Pry was going into his third year. He had his quarterback returning. The stars had aligned, and Virginia Tech let me down. Of all the teams that I bought into last year that I overvalued, Virginia Tech was in the mix. USC would be one of those teams. Utah had quarterback injuries, so I'm not going to put them right there at the top. Kansas falls into that category. Virginia Tech was a top 2 disappointment team for me last year. They weren't number 2. They were number 1. They were the most disappointing team that I talked about all season long, because I picked them, perhaps infamously at this point, to go 10-2 last year. Why? Because I like their schedule, because I like their team, because I like their coach. And they went out and they let me down. It was disappointing. It was a letdown. I was scarred in some regards. Now, for some reason, Virginia Tech is doing a little to suck me back in. I'm not declaring them a dark horse ACC conference contender. They didn't quite scar me, though, as much as Hugh Freeze at Auburn did. Auburn should have been a way better football team last year, and they just weren't. Their quarterback play was abysmal, and their head coach is supposed to kind of hang his hat in that regard. Well, Virginia Tech couldn't win a couple of close games. But you also have to give them a little bit of leeway mentally. This is me talking to myself, by the way. Like, Spencer, you got to give him a little bit of a break. Kyron Drones missed a few games last year. They were 5-4 in the games that he did start. Okay, that's true. They also beat last year one of my favorite teams in the ACC for this year, Georgia Tech. Well, this is also a thing that happened. The problem that I run into with Virginia Tech, even though I'm taking them over 6.5 wins, if they go under that total, even if it's 6-6, a change needs to be made in Blacksburg. This is year 4. Last year was a disappointment. You now need to go out and prove it, Brent Pry. And the schedule should allow them to do just that, even though they're going to start with a loss in all likelihood. By the way, a lot gets made nowadays about the strength of schedule debate, the SEC versus the ACC and the Big Ten and the Big 12 and all, who's got the better league and who wins these games. We've all forgot, or SEC homers have forgotten, that there were non-conference outcomes last year that did actually mean something and showcase how the gap between the SEC and everybody else is closed. An opportunity exists for the ACC to throw another jab in that regard in Virginia Tech's first game, because they play South Carolina. That's my preseason number 5 team in the SEC in my own power rankings. Virginia Tech is not quite that high in the ACC. In fact, for my YouTube audience, I'll throw it up here. I've got Virginia Tech at number 9 in the ACC. So number 9 ACC shouldn't beat number 5 SEC going into the year. But if they do, oh boy, that's a narrative shifter. That's a program turning win potentially for Virginia Tech. Now, I think at home they'll get revenge against Vanderbilt. I'm not picking them to beat South Carolina. So I think they start 1-1. Nothing wrong with that. Please, for the love of all that is good and holy in the world in college football, don't fall victim to Old Dominion again. Don't let the Monarchs get out there and get you. Don't do that. Don't do that, Virginia Tech. I'm not picking you to do that. Just don't let that happen. Don't lose to Wofford the following week. I don't think they will. A 3-1 start. Nothing wrong with that. At NC State is interesting. That's another team that was disappointing last year. But I think NC State is interesting. I don't think they're great. I think they're good enough to trip up Virginia Tech on the road. This is one of those games that if I weren't scarred by last year and what the Hokies failed to accomplish, I'd pick them to win. But instead, no, NC State good enough to win this game. Dave Dorn, good coach, real solid. Like, I'll take Virginia Tech to drop one there. They shouldn't. I think they will. Come back home against Wake Forest, who brought in a bunch of transfers in the offseason with their new head coach, Jake Dickert. Yeah, I'll take continuity over new just about every time. You got to give me a real compelling reason. Wake Forest hasn't done that. I think that's a win. Then rebound with a loss at Georgia Tech, who I really like. Beat Cal at home. Lose to Louisville. I might be picking Louisville to make the ACC championship game. No shame there. But here's where I think it gets real good. If you keep Kyron Drones healthy, if you get his passing numbers to progress, I mean, get him to 65% completion and a better touchdown interception ratio, please, and Virginia Tech could really have something here. At Florida State, I'm sure there are plenty of people, Virginia Tech, that are going to pick you to lose that football game. I'm not one of them, because I do not give Florida State brand bias respect the way a lot of people seem to be doing. That anyone, anywhere in the coaches poll voted for them in the top 25. I don't care if it was only 8 points. They shouldn't have gotten any votes. There is no other, or there are a few other, I should say, 2-10 programs from the year before that would then get top 25 votes. Like, I'm sorry, no. Virginia Tech was a better team last year. Florida State will be improved, no doubt. Give me Virginia Tech to win that game. I think between NC State and Florida State, Virginia Tech is good for 1 win and 1 loss. I think that's the most likely outcome in those 2 road games. So I'll take the win over Florida State, the loss at NC State. But you're looking for a season-defining, program-defining win, kind of another flag-planting win. South Carolina could be that in the non-conference. I think Virginia Tech is going to have a little bit of extra juice. I think Enter Sandman will be a little bit louder when Miami comes to town after that debacle on the road last year. I don't think Miami's quite as good of a team as they were last year. They might be around the same. And Virginia Tech is, I think kind of sort of around the same. And, oh, wait, yeah, there was a Hail Mary that I think was called correctly, and Miami should have won, but also that means what? Yes. At home, I will take Virginia Tech to pull a little bit of an upset there before they win at Virginia final week of the regular season. So I'm not buying all the way in like I did last year with Virginia Tech and picking them to 10 wins and maybe in the ACC championship game. Nope, not going quite that far. But if you've got your quarterback returning again, and if you've got a schedule that works out, I think pretty solidly in their favor, they do play a pair of SEC teams right off the bat. That's not easy. You get a split there. Vanderbilt is no slouch. Certainly Virginia Tech knows that. If you get a split with the SEC teams and you beat Miami at the end of the year, that's enough to keep Brent Pry's job for another season. But if this winds up being under 6.5 wins, certainly you miss a bowl game, Brent Pry's got to go. You go 6-6, I think he should. 7-5, you're probably okay. You'd like to, win a bowl game, get to 8, but you're probably okay there. I'll go 8-4 for Virginia Tech and half by what should be, hopefully, a solid season in Blacksburg. What about Iowa? Well, I talk a lot about schedules on this show. A lot of people talk a lot about schedules. The schedule talk has been aggressive this offseason. Do you realize what Iowa has to do? I'm taking Iowa under 7.5 wins. I think they miss a bowl game. Let me read you their schedule. You hear plenty about Florida's got this tough schedule. Oklahoma's got a tough schedule. Well, Michigan State has a really tough schedule in the Big Ten. Wisconsin's got the toughest schedule in the Big Ten, maybe in the country. Allow me to lay out Iowa's schedule, which is flying under the radar as being one of the toughest in all of college football. You start with Albany. There's your FCS game. Get that out of the way in week 1, like grown-ups do. At Iowa State. That was a runner-up in the Big 12 last year. UMass, not going to be a problem. It's not an FCS school, but it might feel like it in that particular day. At Rutgers. I've seen easier places to play on the road before. That's a bowl team you have to travel to. That's not easy. Indiana. Okay, they were in the playoff last year. At Wisconsin. Coach with a lot of pressure. Oh, you have to go to. You have to go to Madison. All right. I see. Penn State, national championship contender. Minnesota, more than a respectable program. Oregon, reigning Big Ten champs. At USC, aspiring Big Ten title contender. Michigan State, poised for a year 2 leap under Jonathan Smith. At Nebraska, where's the win on the Big Ten slate that you feel is almost 100% for Iowa? Where did it go? Is it the road game at Rutgers? You think Iowa's just rolling into Piscataway and just 20-3 final score? I mean, that'd probably be the best case scenario there, because Rutgers plays a pretty physical brand of football. Rutgers can get a Rutgers home environment. Crazy things can happen out there. Did you watch the Rutgers-Washington game last year? It was one of the weirdest, wackiest games of the college football season that not as many people remember. I do. I was watching it. Things can get crazy out there. I've got Iowa at 5-7. This is just a tough schedule. So Iowa took a step forward offensively last year with Tim Lester at offensive coordinator. I'm not trying to sit here and just completely dunk on Iowa's offense. We've all done that a time or 50 in our lives. I don't need to do it again. Now, their eggs are in the basket of Mark Gronowski, who can't possibly be worse than what Iowa's had recently at the quarterback position. No direct disrespect intended. I'm sure it's kind of being received by those I need not name who have quarterbacked the Hawkeyes in recent years. But last year, new OC, progress. Iowa's defense is going to be one of the 10 best in college football. That's not nothing. It truly is not. There are just too many games on this schedule. You've got the Cy-Hawk game where you have to travel to Ames instead of playing at home. You've got to play Penn State and Oregon and Indiana. I mean, thank goodness you miss Ohio State and Michigan, but whoop-de-doo. You got a bunch of teams. The interesting thing about this Iowa schedule, as I laid out, is there are several matchups on their schedule amongst teams that are kind of like Iowa in that they are, in my view, tier 2 programs, but are trying to make that next jump, like a USC, like a Nebraska, or I think Indiana's kind of at the bottom of tier 1. They want to prove that they can get up to play with the big boys. So the opportunity for Iowa to pull a top 10 upset at Kinnick Stadium, very real. Very real. We'll see where Oregon's ranked at that time. but I perhaps infamously have picked Penn State to go 12-0. So I don't think they're winning that game, but they're going to have a chance. I think Penn State will be undefeated by the time they make their way to Iowa's wonderfully loud and beautiful home stadium with, let's not forget, one of the best traditions in college football with the Wave. So I come down on 5-7, partially because of Mark Gronowski. This is a guy who won a couple of national championships at South Dakota State. He did not go with his head coach to Washington State. Is that because he had a better offer? Seems that way. Iowa's a higher caliber program than Washington State just by the fact that they're in the Big Ten and Washington State is playing in a 2-team conference this year and plays one of the weirdest and randomest schedules in all of college football. By the way, I will have their record prediction for you on this Friday's show. Washington State, that is. But Gronowski feels like a Big Ten quarterback in a number of ways. His completion percentage, not blowing anybody away at South Dakota State. The best piece of evidence you can use at this point in time to draw conclusions about what Gronowski could be at Iowa is the game at Oklahoma State a year ago. Went for 267 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. It's pretty solid. That's better than what Iowa's had at quarterback over the last couple of years. The problem I have, though that's a valuable data point and certainly a feather in Mark Gronowski's cap, that was against an Oklahoma State team that went 3-9. It's not good. Now, he's also playing with guys that were at an FCS program last year and a darn good one. But is Iowa going to have a top-tier receiving core? No. They put up 20 points, South Dakota State did, on Oklahoma State on the road. And that's not all reflected of the quarterback. Gronowski feels a little Big Ten in that he's big, 6'2", 235. His arm is fine. It's not bad. I'm not saying it's a noodle arm. He does not have a howitzer. He does not have some big cannon. His arm is fine. He's not going to make special throws. Can he do enough? We'll see. Their run game should be really good. They might have the leading rusher in the conference this year. That's what Trent Condon of Locked On Hawkeyes thinks, that their ground game will be really good without Caleb Johnson. Okay, I think that's a fair assumption. Defense will be good. But when you're counting on a guy who's coming from the FCS ranks, the number of times that has actually worked out in a big way is few and far between. You might jump to Cam Ward. Cam Ward, before he went to Miami and became the number 1 overall pick, spent 2 years at Washington State. Gronowski's fresh off the FCS ranks. And yeah, he played a solid Power 4 game last year against a team that was bottom of the Big 12 and would have been in the same spot in the Big 10. And the Big 10's got better defenses on average than the Big 12. This schedule, Indiana's defense is better than people think. Wisconsin on the road, Rutgers on the road, not going to be an easy place. The Cy-Hawk game, that's not going to be easy whatsoever. Penn State, Minnesota, Oregon in a row. USC, don't sleep on Danton Lynn as USC's defensive coordinator because he has made huge strides for them on that side of the ball. I don't think they're top of the Big Ten, but they're not going to be bottom third the way they were when they had Alex Grinch as their defense coordinator. Like 5 straight games where Gronowski's going to have to face Indiana, that's got high-level defensive players, go on the road to Wisconsin, ask Oregon last year how easy that was, Penn State, Minnesota, who has a new defense coordinator, admittedly, but still has a strong culture there, and Oregon, and then go at USC. I think Gronowski's fine. I just think the schedule just works out really poorly for the Hawkeyes. So I think they miss a bowl game this year. I don't think that puts hot seat pressure on Kirk Ferentz. I think it's back to the drawing board and see if we can not play as brutal of a schedule as they certainly have this year. But I just don't like the way that it works out whatsoever. So go ahead, Iowa. Prove me wrong. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. Until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.